Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dorothy Bird, the director at the East End Senior Center. Nice to see all of you. I just want to introduce Captain Michael Packard.
Hi, everybody. This is kind of nervous. I'm a fisherman. I'm not a public speaker, but I'm going to do my best. I've led quite a life, and I'm going to kind of start of how I became a fisherman and how I came to be in Provincetown. I lived in New Jersey until I was about 10 years old, and at that time, my parents got divorced, and my dad moved to Europe, and my mom had 5 kids, left with 5 kids with no child support. Her mother and her aunt lived in Provincetown, and we used to come down here in the summer times and visit. And my mom was kind of dabbling in art, and so she decided to move to Provincetown. And by that time, my sisters, I'm the youngest of 5, I got 3 sisters and a brother. We moved to Provincetown, and in the same year that my dad left, my brother, who was 18, hitchhiked across the country with his girlfriend. And they made it to California. They sent postcards the whole way, and then we never heard from them. They completely disappeared off the face of the earth. And so I lost my brother and my dad in the same year, and my mom lost her son and her marriage. So here she was in Provincetown with no money, and it was a tough time. I was about 10 years old. So to get on with how I became a fisherman, even when I was 6 or 7, my mom was doing painting, and she'd go like art in the parks and sell her work, and she'd drag me along. And there was always a pond there or something like that. So I'd always be catching frogs or crayfish or bass or anything like that. So I always had it in my blood. But anyway, we moved to Provincetown, and on my 12th birthday, I woke up and I went out on the deck. We lived right on the water on the East End in Provincetown. And I looked out, and on the beach there was this brand new 14-foot boat with a 9.9 mercury on it. And I was like, look at that boat. What a nice boat. Oh my God. And I come downstairs and my mom says, that's yours. Happy birthday. And she didn't have any money at the time. And the way she bought it was, when my brother disappeared, he had a lot of traveler's checks that were never cashed. And so she saved that money, and that's the money she used to buy that boat. And from then on, I was out. And I just started fishing all the time, and I became a commercial fisherman at 12 years old. I'd go out bass fishing all night, fluke fishing, you name it, I did it. And my mother, oh my God, I mean, the bass bite at night. So I would go out at 12 years old, and I'd fish I'd leave at sunset and come in at sunrise at 12. And my mom would be on the toilet just with diarrhea, just so nervous. But she knew how happy it made me, and she didn't, she let me do it. I have 2 sons now that are teenagers, and I would never in a million years let my kid go out for the whole night. I mean, my kid's got a dirt bike. He goes riding for half an hour, and I get nervous. But so that's how I became a fisherman. So as fishing, I've had a lot of near-death experiences. And one of them was when I was very young with this particular boat. I went out fishing one day, and it was really windy. It was blowing from the north, blowing like towards Barnstable. And it was right at Long Point, and there was a boat up on the beach, like a derelict boat. And I pulled my little skiff up next to it, and I looked, and it was all cracked, and you knew nobody was going to be there to get it. And I said, oh, look at that compass. And so I got my screwdriver out and went to the dash, and then I look up, and my boat's drifting away. And I said, oh my God. And I stripped off all my clothes, I'm like 12, 13 years old. And I start swimming for it, swimming for it, swimming for it. And I thought I was getting closer, And then by that time, the current caught me and I was just getting sucked out into the middle of the bay and I couldn't make it back. And I could see boats way inside going in, but I was away from the transit area. They couldn't see me. And there was this one guy that just happened to swing wide. You might know him, John Snow from Provincetown. He happened to swing wide and he saw me and he pulled me out of the water, bare ass naked, this kid. And he saved my life. So that's my first near-death experience. From then on, I went to Cape Cod Tech for fishing, marine technology, and I went to URI for fisheries.
Did you get your boat? You didn't finish the school?
Oh yeah, he brought me to my boat. Absolutely.
All night.
And then I had to go to the beach and get my clothes. So anyway, I went to college for fishing, marine technology, and when I was 18, I went out to California and lived there, fished in Alaska, California. And then when I was about 28 or 29, I made a trip to Costa Rica, and I loved it. And I decided to start a business down there doing sport fishing. And I would do fish down there for 6 months in the wintertime when the tourists came, and I'd do sport fishing down there and come home to Provincetown and do commercial fishing. I did that for about 10 years, but around the 8th year, I was in the capital of Costa Rica, and to get to the small town where I lived, you took a little plane, and it was like a 30-minute, 25-minute ride. And it held about 15 passengers. And there was 8 passengers there on the day that we flew down. Anyway, we were flying down, and it was just a normal ride. It was cloudy out, and I was just reading my book. And the next thing I knew, it happened so fast, I just blacked out. I didn't even know we crashed. And I woke up just looking in the jungle, looking up, and I was like, oh my God, I just got in a plane crash. And I'm alive. I was just stunned. But I was all by myself. I looked all around and there was nobody else. I couldn't see a plane, I couldn't see anybody. I was like, what's going on here? And then I could hear some voices. I got up and I was very injured, and I stumbled and followed the voices, and there were 4 people. 2 pilots died and 1 of the tourists died, but there was 4 other survivors. The plane it had flipped over, and the front part caught on fire, and the back part stayed intact. And everybody was there, like a little bit away from the plane, and they were like, oh my God, you're alive, you're alive. The reason I survived is I was in the front of the plane and I didn't have my seatbelt on. The guy next to me and the 2 pilots, they had their seatbelts on, and when the plane flipped, the front broke but I got ejected into the jungle and just flown through the air. And that's why I wasn't with the other survivors, because they were in the back of the plane, which just flipped over, and they were in their seatbelts. So we're in the middle of the jungle, up in the mountains. I mean, we couldn't hear anything or see anything. One day, the next day, 3rd day, 3 days with no water, no food, and I have a punctured lung, 4 broken ribs, cut Achilles tendon, a bunch of stitches in my head, a crushed eye socket, and I was on my way out. I was about to be dead, and this coffee farmer had heard that a plane crashed, and he was looking all through the jungle, and he found us. And they sent the ambulances in, and the nearest road, they had to make a stretcher, and it was 4 hours of them carrying me up this mountain to the nearest car. And that's the story of the plane crash. I survived, and I was in the hospital 2 weeks, and got right back on the same plane and flew back to my house down there, and got on with my life. So that's two. So I moved back. I sold my place in Costa Rica after the 2008 crash. I just wasn't getting the clients. So I moved back to Provincetown, and I started diving for lobsters commercially. And Provincetown is the only place you can do that. There's nowhere else in the United States you can dive commercially for lobsters. It's just because the way Provincetown is, it comes out and there's this bank that it'll be like 30 feet of water, and right by those windows it'll be 150 feet of water. So there's this bank like this. In the summertime, the lobsters are migrating along that bank. So it's feasible to do it. And in the 60s and 70s, there was a half a dozen guys doing it. But starting in the late 90s, when the sharks started showing up and the divers were getting older and there wasn't any more recruitment of younger people because of the sharks, slowly and slowly they dropped out, and I was the only one left. And I've been the only diver for about 8 years now. I'm the only one that does it. There's been 4 or 5 instances when I've been down there and seen great whites. Very, very scary. You know, I'm just collecting lobsters, and then I just see this big shadow, like 20 feet, just moving along. And then I just I get in the smallest ball I can so he doesn't see me, and just sit there, and I wait like 5 minutes to see if he turns around, and then I just go back to work. I have to. I don't think about it. If I thought about it, I wouldn't be able to do it. And so I've seen that 2 or 3 times, and that's always my greatest fear, is getting eaten by a shark or bitten by a shark. So 2 summers ago, I was out diving, and it's just a normal day. I'd done like 3 dives, and I was right off Hatches Harbor, Race Point, in about 50 feet of water. And I jumped in, and I was descending down to the bottom, and I almost got to the bottom, and all of a sudden, this thing just hit me like a freight train, and everything went black. And I was like, okay, this is it. I'm dead. This is the shark. And that was my instant thought. And then right after that, I said, no, it's not a shark. You know, I don't feel the cuts, or I was like, it's a whale. I'm in a whale's mouth. And I could feel the movement. He was moving really fast. I could feel the water rushing, but it was all black. I was trapped in his mouth. Contrary to what everybody else said, that I was swallowed, I wasn't swallowed. I was gummed, or whatever you want to call it. So I'm caught in this thing's mouth, and my regulator falls out. So I can't breathe, and I said, I better get that. And I put it back in, and it's just traveling through the water, and I'm like, oh my God. Out of all my near-death experiences, this one, I was 100% sure I was going to die. I mean, I was sure. I was like, there's no way. I tried struggling, and I couldn't budge it. I couldn't. And so many thoughts went through my mind. I was like, oh my God, I got a full tank of air. And he's just swimming, and I'm like, okay, how am I going to die here now? Am I just going to be in this mouth for the next 50 minutes until I run out of air? I mean, can you imagine that? Knowing that you're going to die, but in 50 minutes you're going to die, but you're okay now. Oh my God. So I kept struggling, and then all of a sudden, I feel like he's change direction and he's getting more erratic, and all of a sudden he comes up to the surface and he throws his head back and forth, and I go flying through the air and land in the water. I'm like, oh my God, I survived. I survived. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. And my buddy my mate that follows my bubbles, he was right there, and he immediately came over with his boat, and then the pain kicked in. I felt like both my legs were broken, and I was crying and he couldn't get me in the boat, and so another boat came by. I don't know if anybody knows Joe Francis from Truro. He came over, and then they hoisted me aboard, and they went to shore, and I went to the ambulance and went to the hospital, and they couldn't find anything wrong with me. It turns out I had all kinds of torn ligaments, ACL, MCL, meniscus, but none of that showed up in the emergency room. So I was only there for a couple hours, and they sent me home. From then on, it was just a news. I'm sure you guys remember it. It was just inundated with reporters and news, and I turned them all down. I was like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And I don't know how many Republicans or Democrats are here, but Tucker Carlson wanted me on. I was like, no thanks. But then Jimmy Kimmel called. And I thought, you know what? That'd be fun. That would be fun. They're going to fly us out to LA. My wife, my mate, my wife's sister, my mate's brother. They're going to put us up in the best hotel. Food, everything. Why not? Let's do it. And so they flew out, and I did the Jimmy Kimmel show. And one note of that, I don't know if anybody saw it, but 2 minutes or 5 minutes before I walk on stage, they bring me just off stage so I could see, and there's this fake whale on the stage, like huge, big fake whale, and they want me to stand in the whale's mouth while Jimmy Kimmel interviews me. And I'm like, no way. There's no way. I'm not doing it. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to embarrass myself and make a fool of myself. And they got all nervous. They were like, come on. It's a celebration of your life. We're going to laugh at this situation. You can do it. And I said, well, I'm just going to tell Jimmy when I get out there that I didn't like it. And he goes, well, you can tell Jimmy whatever you want. So I went out there and made sure that I wasn't happy. But we went on with the show. And everybody said it was good. So that ended that experience, and that was 2 summers ago. I continued to dive. I dove last summer. Getting ready for another season now. I'm getting older. I'm not going to be able to do it much longer, but I live in Wellfleet, so I oyster in Wellfleet, and bay scallops, and drag for quahogs. Been a fisherman, and I'll always be a fisherman, and I'll dive as long as I can because I love diving. I mean, one reason is it's just another world. You get out of just this world. You're the only one down there. And the other thing is, I'm the only one that does it, and I make a really good living. And what person in this world is the only person that does something? You know? Everybody in the world, there's not another guy that dives for lobsters. I mean, maybe in the Caribbean and stuff, but in the United States. And so those 2 things just keep me doing it, and I just love it. Thank you. It was a humpback whale. Oh, and I should mention, humpback whale, which you're probably aware of, is a filter feeder. It feeds on, you know, small fish, little sand eels and small fish. And where I was diving, there was a lot of small fish. And so he just had his mouth open and he was mowing the bait. And he probably saw the bubbles, maybe thought it was the bait fish. And so it was a mistake on his part. I mean, he didn't like it at all either. Not far. I was only in the whale probably 20, 30 seconds. It sounds a lot longer when I tell this story, but it was the longest time in my life. I mean, the longest 20 or 30 seconds you could ever imagine. I was getting pressed on, yeah. I think that's what did my ligaments, you know. I was kind of sideways in his mouth like this. My boys?
Yes. Are they fishermen?
To tell you the truth, they're both certified divers. And they both got certified really young, like when they were 13. They do some sport diving, but no, neither of them really want to be fishermen or a diver, thank God. Because I would never like follow their bubbles. I mean, that's another thing. For my mate, it is the most stressful job. Because when he follows my bubbles, I mean, it's hard to follow bubbles when it's rough or foggy or windy, and so he loses me a lot. And so he loses my bubbles and he doesn't know where I'm at. And so he says, you have to be really patient and just know he's okay, I'll find him. But you lose the bubbles, you don't know if he's dead, did a shark get him, is he all right, is he laying dead on the bottom? So it's a really hard job for him. Actually, there's a guy that he's been working on it about a year and a half, doing a documentary on my whole life, basically that story I just told you. And he's just about finished, and he's an independent filmmaker. He works at the Boston Globe. He's done a number of other small documentaries. I'm not much of a writer, but a lot of people have told me I need to write a book, memoir, or what have you. Maybe when I'm older. All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot.